So if you're anything like me and you have isolated yourself in the past and you have just stayed in your room just hyper fixating on every mistake you have made, I want you to rest. I want you to see it as it's being destined. It was meant to happen. Hi friends. So I have been gone for a while, or just off YouTube, off of social media for several weeks now. And there have been so many lessons that I've learned, and one of them is about mistakes. Now, I have always been someone who, whenever I make a mistake or maybe I do something imperfectly, I have the habit of beating myself down and hyper fixating on that singular mistake, that singular event. So if you're anything like me, this video is for you. I've been in sort of a space where I've been reflecting on my past decisions, things that I wish I could have done differently or better or not at all. And the one thing about mistakes is they're in the past. Thankfully, they're in the past, but somehow we carry our mistakes into our present simply because we keep thinking about them, we keep ruminating over them. But this is one thing that I've learned that gave me comfort. For several weeks, I was reading the story of Samson. So, if you know anything about Samson, he is a character in the Bible who was born with this special ability of strength. He was extremely strong, and and his strength was somehow because of his hair. His hair had this divine property about it that God gave him strength through his hair. And his family was specifically instructed upon his birth to not cut his hair, or else once his hair is cut, he would lose all his strength. And there is a point I'm getting to with this story. So Samson grows up. He's a grown man now, and he has this affinity to Philistine women. Now, if you understand the historical context of this story, you know that Samson was an Israelite. Him and his family were Jews, but at that time, the Philistines, which were pagans, ruled over them, and they treated them badly. And so, according to the Jewish religion, they could not intermarry with the Philistines because they're Jews and the Philistines are pagans. And he just couldn't marry outside of the ethnic group. And so we see throughout the story that Samson sort of has a weakness for their women, the Philistine women. He has this weakness for them. He wants to marry one of them. And you see a verse where it says his parents were like confused because they were like, we're not supposed to fraternize with these people. It's against our religion. Also, too, they're ruling over us and treating us bad. Like, why the heck are you finding their women attractive? But there is a specific verse that said that even though his parents didn't like that he had this affinity for their women, it says that God intended it that way, and that God actually planned it that way. That this weakness he had for these women was actually intentional and planned by God, because God wanted to find a way to get to revenge on these people and eventually wipe them out. So I found that very interesting, because eventually Samson meets Delilah, the infamous Delilah, and he makes another mistake of telling her his secret about his hair. So then she now brings she calls on the Philistine soldiers. They come, cut his hair. Now his strength is gone. He's thrown into prison. His eyes are gouged out, and it seems like the absolute end for him. And anyone reading this story would have been like, Samson, you messed up. And he did. He did two major things. He was sleeping with Philistine women and going after them. And number two, he told his people's greatest enemy his secret behind his strength. And that basically cost him almost his life, basically. That he was now thrown into prison. He lost his strength, and it seemed like that was the end for him. And anybody would look at him and be like, why did you do that? But remember, in the beginning it said God intended it to be so. Remember that part. So then here comes a day where the Philistines are having a festival, and they're holding this festival in their temple. And the Bible says that there are about 3,000 or more people gathered in that temple. Now, they call Samson out because they sort of want to taunt him and sort of gloat about their accomplishments in basically finding out his secret and capturing him. So then they bring Samson out, and mind you, his eyes had been gouged out, so he's blind. He can't see. He can't see, and so he has a little servant boy next to him who is guiding him into the temple, and he tells the boy, please place both my hands on both pillars of the temple, and he does that. And then you see in that verse how he cries out to God, and then God's strength now returns to him, and once he receives that strength, he pushes down the pillars, and everything falls down, and 3,000 Philistines die. And that was the exact revenge that God wanted to inflict on the Philistines. So in the end, God's purpose was accomplished. But I find it so interesting how God intentionally used Samson's weakness, or placed that weakness in him, to eventually get to that point. Anybody would have looked at Samson and his mistakes and said that he messed up, but then in God's eyes, he was actually doing everything according to God's plan. That was actually God's plan all along. And it really is a message of comfort, knowing that your life is so deeply rooted in God, that He already has your entire life planned out. The Bible says that God is omniscient. He knows everything. He knows the end from the beginning. He knew you before you were born, but before you were even conceived, before you even became a thought to your parents, God already knew you. So if God already knew you, would He not have known every single mistake that you will make? Would He not have known exactly how your life would have turned out? Would He not have known? Because at the end of the day, He's an all-knowing God. And And he has already woven your mistakes into his plan. And honestly, at this point in my life, my journey, I'm realizing that with God, a lot of mistakes really aren't mistakes. Sometimes he'll allow you to make a mistake, but it was actually a lesson. Sometimes our mistakes are God's way of redirecting us. Sometimes our mistakes are a way of God showing us what we need to work on in order to become who He has called us to be. So essentially, at the end of the day, your mistakes are really not mistakes. They are just pivotal points in your journey that have to happen in order for you to grow. It was meant to happen. And even though it feels uncomfortable right now, but there was something in that lesson you had to learn. And it doesn't change God's plans for your life. It doesn't change God's mind concerning you. So find comfort in that, and pick yourself up and keep moving. There is so much more ahead of you than what is behind you. Until next time, bye.